see with definitely Black female run coaches, wasn't seeing a lot, and wasn't seeing anyone who talked about training folks with autoimmune conditions or who were as open with maybe their own diagnosis. There's a big identity shift that comes with having a diagnosis. A lot of folks who like me were pretty active before got diagnosed with something. Now we're trying to figure out who are we?
Welcome to the Safe Space Running Podcast. We're here to encourage, enable, and empower. I am so honored to have the next guest here, Mireille. Mireille, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a work day. As we talked about, I'm having some technical issues, but it is what it is. We're going to get this stuff done. That's all I know. We're going to make it happen. So before we dig into the deep part of the conversation, what do you have lined up on your race schedule for this year, if you have anything?
You know, that's a funny question because I kind of entered this year knowing that I would take a back seat from racing in order to address some other like foundational health things that I want to work on. We might get into this a little bit later, but I had a big almost comeback season last year in 2025 coming off a lupus flare, like a major flare that I had. So dealing with recovering from that and then getting back into the racing, I really poured a lot into training because I do love to train. And I'm glad I gave myself the space to do that. And so that's what made me feel okay to take a step back this year to work on other like health things. Because I'm really about like taking a whole human, like well-rounded approach to this. And training is great, running is great, but sometimes we have to recognize that like, you know, there's other things that we don't have time to work on because we're spending so much time in the training cycle.
I totally agree. Rest is a good thing. Rest is a very, very much thing we need. A lot of us runners and walkers are pretty stubborn to that, but I'm glad you're taking some time out for you and your health, which goes into my the center of this conversation. As we've talked about, this is a continuation of our coach series that we're highlighting coaches around the country who are really making impact into the running and walking space. You actually had hinted to this as well. You were diagnosed with lupus, and you are a coach who deals with autoimmune deficiencies. So can you describe to the audience what that is, how that impacted your running and your journey is with that?
Yeah, so by definition, autoimmune disorder, autoimmune condition, or disease, people have their preferences for naming it what it is. It's essentially when your own immune system attacks itself. It doesn't recognize, you know, your immune cells, all the stuff that's supposed to keep us healthy as its own, and so it kind of like multiplies and can run havoc in people's bodies. There are over 80 different diagnoses for autoimmune conditions, anything from what I have, which is lupus, to some more common ones folks might have heard, like rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Lots of people have it. 80% of those diagnosed are women of color, unfortunately. So that is a big deal. And so I was diagnosed when I was an undergrad. It kind of was like not a night and day effect. So one thing you'll hear from folks who have autoimmune conditions is like the journey just to get the diagnosis is only the first hurdle, right? It's a lot of labs. It's a lot of going to physicians and specialists and a lot of being dismissed, if I'm being honest. Like sometimes we have the, you know, there's a certain health bias where like if you look healthy, if your labs look normal, doctors are saying there's nothing wrong with you, right? It's only you really have to persist and advocate for yourself in order to get that diagnosis when you internally know that something is wrong. So I was diagnosed in college after about a year and a half of things just sort of like going downhill, as I would say. It's like, you know, joint pain, having trouble getting out of bed. And this is coming from a person who like, I loved working out before. Like I was pretty active. I loved going to the gym. So to go from that to not being able to like walk across my campus without pain, that was like a whoa situation.
Wow.
Yeah. So, eventually I wasn't exercising because it was too painful, or I was dealing with the chronic fatigue, brain fog, all of these things. And eventually the diagnosis came back and it was lupus. And I had never heard of lupus. I'd never heard of autoimmune anything like most everybody else. It's like you only know when it starts to affect you or someone super close to you. And so I remember sort of, you know, we get the diagnosis and I'm still in the hospital. I'm sort of just like laying there, I'm 22 at the time, so I'm like, I've literally got my whole life ahead of me, and there's graduation around the corner. I'm just laying there like what do you do with this? Yeah.
I think that's we hinted at it prior too, but you don't know what you don't know. And I mean, speaking for me personally, it's part of me is a little it's tough to, not necessarily tough to admit, but like it's something that I wasn't necessarily aware of,
Mm-hmm.
nor did I give it the thought that there are. Of course, we know that there's athletes with different conditions. You have Paralympic athletes, things of that nature, but I never really thought, and I don't know how others are in that there's a whole other scope of athletes that have other different medical conditions or so that they're
Mm-hmm.
going through for that. So that takes me to my next question for you is it's one thing for you to to go through your fight and to get to the point where you are because you've all that said, I believe you are 14 marathons deep. All
Yeah.
that, like you're
Yeah.
not just out here you're not just out here doing the thing. You doing the thing. Like you're out here making moves. You've done an ultra at this point in time with all of that going on. And I like to point out that you also coach with that. So what was the motivation behind you not only accomplishing those things with your diagnosis, but also reaching out to others to help them accomplish these great things with those same or with similar conditions?
Yeah. Back when I was newly diagnosed, and then through treatment, it took a year and a half to be cleared to exercise. And I'm thinking, like, great, there should be some plan to follow, but unfortunately, there was none. It was like my doctor
Hmm.
just said, "Oh yeah, go ahead and go back." But I was like, "Well, what? Who knows what that looks like? Like, people need a plan, people need structure." And so I was kind of just kind of winging it at the time. And I went back to running specifically because it was the most accessible thing at that time, right? It was free to run on campus and all of that stuff. But that's something that I kind of tucked in the back of my head for years, right? When I graduated, came back to LA, that's when I was actually exposed to structured running, as I would call it. We would have
Hmm.
nights to meet up with for easy runs and strength workouts and long runs, and that's when things started actually like clicking in my mind, like, oh, there's a process to this. This is how you end up building things. But of course, at the time, I was training like everybody else, right? Because I didn't know any different, and I wasn't. I didn't talk about having lupus as much back then, right? All I wanted to do was to get healthy again, to move again, to regain all of that strength. And so some years go by, and I'm training and I'm doing the marathons, and the thought of becoming a run coach comes to mind. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, well, how do I stick out? Like, how do I actually help people? Because anybody can go out and be a run coach. Like, you may not mesh with everybody, but there are a lot out there. But what I didn't see was definitely black female run coaches. Wasn't seeing a lot of those, and wasn't seeing anyone who talked about training folks with autoimmune conditions or who were as open with maybe their own diagnosis, right? And that's where I kind of felt like, okay, this is the lane that I could occupy, because I remembered that feeling way back of not having any guidance, training like everyone else because that's the only option that I had. Having to learn what one key difference the difference between like what is the normal training fatigue and what is the autoimmune fatigue. Like, what do I do when my labs start going down, and what does pausing training look like in that context? There's so many other things that autoimmune folks have to think about. One, on just like a daily normal basis, whether that is dealing with medication and treatment, how we recover, how our sleep and certain conditions can affect how often and frequently that we move. And then on top of that, you're placing the training stress, the training load, and trying to keep goals in mind. And there's a big identity shift that comes with having a diagnosis. A lot of folks who like me were pretty active before got diagnosed with something. Now we're trying to figure out who are we? Who are we in this new body that we're trying to figure out? Am I still that athlete? Can I still achieve those goals? That's the one thing I actually tend to talk about more, is like just the mindset, just the belief that we can learn to retrust the body, that we can push ourselves again. It may just look a little different from the old timeline that you had, but that doesn't mean it's impossible.
I like that you had mentioned about the mindset aspect of that. I think that's something that's super important to keep in mind. And again, I can only speak from an empathy standpoint because I don't. It's an experience that you guys have that I can't, but I can always try to sit and listen and understand.
Mm-hmm.
But can you describe, for you and the athletes that you work with, how do you get them through that mental shift? Because I'm sure that that something changes. It scares me, and
Yeah.
I'm not there, but it's encouraging and inspiring to see, athletes like yourself who can still make it through that. So for any of our new coaches who may be deciding to work with athletes who may have different conditions, how do you employ that mental shift to encourage your athletes to get through that, through sometimes a very difficult time. Running's already difficult as is. Running's simple, but it's difficult.
Not
But how do you
easy.
get them
Yeah.
through, right? Like
Yeah.
they be putting us through the ringer real time.
Yeah.
But how do you help them through that mental portion?
I think the first thing is always going to be giving the athlete the space that they need to feel what they want to feel. There's no timeline that one can put on when things will start to feel okay, right? And that's just an unknown that we have to learn to work with. When we have good weeks, we celebrate. When we have not so good weeks, we adjust and we look at what we can do better. But we don't take it as a failure, right? We can't take it as a failure because we're already dealing with so much. Like the least we can do is pat ourselves on the back for having the courage and the strength to show up the way that we still could, even if it wasn't at 100%. Maybe it was 10% that week. So always giving the person the space that they need to come to things on their own term. But I'm kind of like along the way, like through check-in calls, through guidance on the training logs. I'm like, remember this. Remember when you couldn't do this 2 weeks ago? Look at you now. You just did these two runs back to back, and you're able to bounce back the next day, right? It's always looking for those little wins because sometimes as the athlete or anyone who's gotten coached, it's hard to see it from our perspective, right? If we're in our athlete mind, we're never looking at our wins. We're almost just checking boxes maybe, or just like moving on to the next thing. So as a coach, we're the ones that have to be that back end cheerleader, the ones that are like in the data and in the logs and sort of pointing out like, hey, your pace was really good. Like you were more consistent on this workout than you were a month ago.
That's that reinforcement. I'm glad that reinforcement always transcends behind, beyond, what people go through, and what that positive reinforcement. I think that's what's so crucial about having a physical coach. And again, we've talked about in the series about, plans and, AI programs, which again, they all have their place. I want to, always make that known that they have their place, but there's nothing like having a coach that understands your struggle, that understands what you're going through. And I believe that, what you do in the space that you're in is so unique, but it's so necessary. It's so necessary to have that relation. I always talk about representation matters, and what you're doing and representing that and doing so well, it's so powerful to hear. With that said, I have my last question for you, and this will be around, again, this is geared towards new coaches, and you have, let's say someone comes up and, they're firstly entering the space, they're a little nervous, they don't know. What would be one thing you would recommend to them as they're entering into this new atmosphere, this new, this new coaching era for them?
Yeah, I think if I could relate, one thing that I learned is that slow and steady is actually stronger. Slow and steady is a better way to set your foundation. First of all, I think when someone gets certified, what I tend to hear is that, oh, I got certified, now what? So then we tend to sit on this. And that can actually be a really powerful space to not rush into the next thing, to not rush into like, oh, I need to market. Oh, I need my first athlete. Oh, I need to like sit down, figure out your purpose, your why. What does this certification mean to you, and how do you need to like implement it throughout the world? But yeah, I think sometimes all of us we want to do the coaching because we genuinely want to help, but we should always remember to just take it a little bit slow, do things one at a time, set up your system, set up your foundation. You don't want to be the person that like all of a sudden you have an influx of athletes, which is great, but you don't know how to manage them.
That's important. I love that you said that, slow down. Like that's a common thing that, as weird as us liking to run, we shouldn't try to do the opposite of slowing down. But from the coaching perspective of not trying to take on too much and establishing who you are as a coach. We've had a couple, what I've loved about, being completely transparent, what I've loved about this series is that there's parallels between good coaching and good principles. And a lot of them are, the common theme that I've heard is knowing your athlete. And knowing that, and you have to take time to figure that out. We can't save every athlete, but we can find a space in a niche that we excel at, that we are expertise at, and that we can, leverage. I was just talking with our coach Bertrand a couple weeks ago,
Coach
and
B.
he that deal. Coach B is dope. But he and I say this to piggyback to the next point, but he said his was about collaboration with other coaches. And I say that from all genuine, that's a space with autoimmune conditions I don't have any experience in. But now coming in contact with you and, for our listeners and new coaches, it's okay to refer other people to other coaches. There's enough spaces. And I think you said it best, we're all out here genuinely trying to help athletes. We're all out here trying to genuinely help each other. It's best for us to really leverage other coaches who are better, experts in that space.
Yeah.
So how can people find you? Because again, I'm going to be referring athletes to you, of course. But for our listeners and viewers, how can they find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, I am most active on Instagram, and my handle is Hey Coach Mireille. I also have a website you can check out, as well as a newsletter you can subscribe to if you're more of not on the gram, but you still want to get updates on things going on. Feel free to subscribe to the newsletter.
Yes, and I'm subscribing myself. I've been checking out again. I checked out your website and done a lot. I would strongly encourage, even if you're just looking into coaching, sign up to the newsletter, sign up to the Instagram, definitely on the Instagram, and learn. Because you have a lot of information about education on this. And I've been learning so much just from looking through. And again, that may not be my wheelhouse, but at the same time, it's important for us to be aware of the different conditions that people are going through while they're trying to be successful in running and walking. So I can't thank you enough for your time. And I truly, and again, I know we just recently met, but I've been doing a lot of research on you, and I'm truly inspired by what you've done, by what you've accomplished, what you've gone through, and that you put that back into the community. So I'm sure your athletes would agree. I'm sure your community in Los Angeles would agree. And again, you've been recognized. You've been out there. You got features in Runner's World. You've got, Mireille is on her stuff. Like, for real, I'm just being real. It's not like she just this small. No, she's been doing her thing for quite some time. But I truly say that I'm inspired by what you do, by what you've overcome, and I thank you for what you do for the community and what you've done and your continued impact for us all. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, truly my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a great one.